Taxpayers of Funding the Decaying American Bureaucracy, and Paying the Price Too, by Julian Raven. After appearing on Nick Meyer's podcast, The One-Armed Madman, based in the Midwest, I was struck again by the all-too-familiar echo of punitive institutional resistance. Nick, who lost his arm in a tragic powerline accident while working as a lineman, shared a harrowing story of dealing with workers' compensation bureaucratic red tape. His experience resonated deeply with my own journey, a journey through layers of obstruction from officials who seemed to have forgotten whom they serve. Nick's frustration was palpable. For over a decade, he faced indifferent and adversarial bureaucrats who did everything but outright deny him his medical claims. After he lost his arm and suffered a traumatic brain injury in the line of duty. The emotional toll, in my opinion, wasn't just physical or financial. It was spiritual. It was eating away his soul. That's what makes dealing with bureaucracy so uniquely anger-inducing. Being a victim of institutional apathy while knowing these individuals are being paid by us, the taxpayers. We pay their salaries, fund their pensions, and yet in return we are too often met with entitlement, arrogance, and hostility. Over the years, I've heard the same refrain from those working inside the system. They're not there to serve, they're there for the benefits. I've heard from candidates, office holders, and public employees alike. It's a calculated 20-year investment. Stick it out, retire early, and enjoy a taxpayer-funded cushion for the rest of your life. There's nothing wrong in principle with seeking security. But when self-interest becomes the core motivation, it poisons the culture of public service. That poison has infected our bureaucracies, turning public institutions into closed, self-serving machines that grind down the very people they were created to help. Growing up under the awareness of the British system while living in Spain, public employment was always referred to as civil service. Employees were known as civil servants, a title that reflected the ethical heart of their duty to serve their fellow citizen in the name of the government, on behalf of the taxpayer. That spirit of servanthood has nearly vanished in America today. One of our greatest speeches ever delivered in defense of that ideal came from President Abraham Lincoln at the Gettysburg Address. Reflecting on the bloodshed endured to free the oppressed and unite the Union, Lincoln reasserted a moral foundation for government. He declared that America must ensure government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. These were not just political words. They were spiritual declarations. Lincoln reminded the nation that it was under God, not above, not beside, not separate, but under, like servants. When the orientation is engraved on the soul of a people, it builds a character that does not forget its place in the great order of things. But when humility is mocked, rejected, and replaced by self-idolatry, the result is always the same: oppression and brutality, whether in a Soviet gulag, a totalitarian regime, or behind the frosted glass of a government agency office. This is the spiritual disease infecting modern American bureaucracy. The civil servants have too often become the masters of abuse, reflecting a deeper rot in the leadership that shaped them. For decades now, those in power have modeled godless immorality, pride, arrogance, indifference, and animosity that has pulled itself out from under God, rather than humility, service, and empathy. Once this servant-hearted posture flowed from the religious values deeply held by many in the West. Wherever you see oppression in history, it reflects not just a failure of policy, but a failure of values, from the greatest to the least. I was also reminded, through the lens of my own legal battle with the Smithsonian Institution, of another figure from the same Lincolnian era, Joseph Henry, the Smithsonian's founding secretary and one of America's premier scientists. A man of deep Christian faith and noble character, Henry served the institution for 37 years. His long tenure wasn't just marked by academic brilliance, but by a profound sense of virtue and civic responsibility, qualities that shaped the Smithsonian's original vision as a beacon of public enlightenment. Even before Henry, there was Richard Rush, the American envoy to the United Kingdom and the attorney appointed by President Andrew Jackson to secure James Smithson's bequest, the gold that would fund the nation's institution. What struck me most while reading through Rush's correspondence during the 2-year legal effort was how he ended every letter to the U.S. Secretary of State with a simple yet powerful phrase: "Humbly at your service, Richard Rush." That man understood his place. He embodied the servant-hearted leadership our institutions were once built upon. Contrast that with what I've experienced today. In a separate bureaucratic conflict involving my art studio in Elmira, New York, I've spent over a decade dealing with the Department of Environmental Conservation, the DEC. And as potential litigation now looms, the pattern is painfully familiar. Despite my unwavering cooperation and good faith facilitating the DEC's investigation into chemical pollutants that predate my ownership, I've been treated not as a partner, but as a suspect. It's like being arrested for a murder committed decades before you even bought the house, simply because you found the bones buried in the basement. I'm not exaggerating. What made the American experiment original and radically different was that its founding values were rooted in a person whose greatest act of leadership was to take up a towel and wash the feet of his followers. Jesus Christ, the servant king, shattered the back of tyranny with what the world saw as weakness, but what heaven knew as strength. This revolutionary image of the greatest bending low to serve the least redefined power and became the bedrock of liberty for nations that embraced him. You see it in George Washington, who, after leading a revolution and helping to birth a new nation, walked away from power. He returned to his farm and to his tomatoes. In a world of tyrants, that act was unthinkable, remarkable. But Washington did it for one reason: his conscience. He knew his service was to a higher authority. He didn't grasp power, he let it go, because he knew the power he wielded was not his to keep. It was a trust to be used to serve, not dominate. This is the choice we all face: use power to serve or use power to abuse. One leads to freedom, the other to decay. And that, my friends, is where we find ourselves today.